Hello there and welcome to this video. I've just read the very sad news that Rick Laird, the great bass player with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, but also the bass player for so many jazz legends over the years, sadly passed away. We were aware that he wasn't well and he was in a hospice, so it wasn't totally unexpected, but actually reading the news, for me as a lifelong Mahavishnu Orchestra fan, it's quite a shock. I suppose imagining that there was a possibility somewhere that the band would get together at some point has always been a big discussion point amongst fans, and I suppose that is now put the band now into history. You know, we will never ever see those guys on stage again. So I'd like to pay tribute to Rick Laird, who, as everyone will be saying, you know, was the real foundation, you know, and solid ground that the musicians and the musicians in the Mahavishnu Orchestra were able to build the things they built upon. You know, he seemed to play without ego. I think that's one of the things about Rick Laird, and he was quite happy to provide that foundation and provide it in a way which allowed the four of the musicians to really pioneer new ways of playing on all their instruments. And it's a good question to ask how Rick did this. Rick Laird was born in New Zealand, and he studied jazz there. He played double bass primarily. I think we must have got to a certain age where he realised that the jazz scene in New Zealand was pretty limited. Although, if I'm right, and I'm making this video up as we go because I've just heard the news, but I think the great Mike Nock, who was a fusion pioneer, you know, was from New Zealand too. Anyway, Rick ends up travelling to England, and he becomes the house bass player for Ronnie Scott's, and he plays with all the greats, you know, Roland Kirk, Wes Montgomery, you know, everybody. When I was a kid, I had a video of him playing with Bob Brookmeyer. It was a Jazz 625 gig, and he played absolutely wonderfully. There's no way you could become the house bass player at Ronnie Scott's at that time if you hadn't got every aspect of jazz down. So Rick Laird, just on the evidence of what he did before the Mahavishnu Orchestra, must have been a really incredible bass player with a huge amount of facility. Before the Mahavishnu Orchestra, he joined the Buddy Rich band. And Buddy, of course, was famous for being so hard on his musicians. So, you know, I've always been aware that Rick Laird was on the same level as the other guys in the Mahavishnu Orchestra. He was a virtuoso musician. But I think the thing about Rick was his ego was in a different place. He wanted to make the music as great as possibly it could be, rather than shining himself. In that way, he was an absolute master musician. You know, a really great player once said to me that, you know, when you listen to a player, you can tell when they're a very good player, but it's very hard to tell when you're a truly great player, because all that incredible stuff in a master musician actually gets hidden and the music starts to come out, you know. There's a great story of who would it have been? I think it might well have been Jan Hammer. One of the guys, when he joined the Mahavishnu Orchestra, received these charts from John McLaughlin. I think it was Jan Hammer, and he went to John Abercrombie. And John Abercrombie, who was an incredible player, looked at them in disbelief. He was like, I can't understand this. The time signatures and the tempos and the way they're constructed is absolutely, it's indecipherable. At the heart of that, at the heart of the Mahavishnu Orchestra, was the bass. So Rick Laird was chosen, I think, by John McLaughlin because John knew exactly what he was getting. He was getting a formidable musician who could play those charts and not only play them and get through them, but provide this groundwork on which he could build this incredible vision that he'd had with the band. I think that's really, really important. So Rick's place in bass history is forever, you know, held there by the achievement that he made in that band. Of course, he didn't play like Jaco Pastorius or Stanley Clarke, but for me, his bass solo on One Word is absolutely incredible. One of my favourite bass solos. And I think the reason why I love that, he's all over the place. He's doing all sorts of things on the bass. It sounds incredible. The way he's grooving with Billy Cobham is incredible. But that bass solo, for all its soloing, never leaves the function that a bass player has. The thing about people like Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius is they are often going into the territory of lead instruments, you know. But he is a bass player playing an incredible solo in the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and never does he ever leave that function. He's always sounding like a bass player. How many bass players on record can you hear? There's some rock guys have done that great, you know. But in the jazz world, he was a humble man, I think, and he had an artistic vision, but I think he put the music first. And I think to have one guy in the Mahavishnu Orchestra doing that was the last piece of the jigsaw, you know. And we can imagine having a bass player like Stanley Clarke in that band may not have worked so well as five people vied, you know, to launch, you know, at the horizon, you know, at 300 BPM in 1716, you know. When that's going on, you need somebody really holding it down and providing that balance, that counterweight, that yin to the yang. So hats off to him. I know I read an interview with him, you know, when he left the Mahavishnu Orchestra, he made a solo album called Soft Focus, which is a great album, but completely unlike the Mahavishnu Orchestra, very delicate. I think he got work on the jazz scene, but I read an interview somewhere where he just got fed up with playing Stella by Starlight for like the 100th time. He really questioned how much creativity was going on in the jazz world, you know, or at least in the gigs that he was getting offered. And he then moved sideways into photography and had a great career as a photographer. And some of his photographs, you know, crop up on many jazz albums. There's a photo on, I think, one of the Shakti albums that he took. His time playing in jazz gave him an opportunity to photograph all sorts of jazz greats. And I know, you know, later on that was discovered as well. So he gave to jazz in more than just being the bass player of the Mahavishnu Orchestra. But for me personally, reading that news just now about Rick, it's been a real shock. Anyone who watches this channel knows that I absolutely love the Mahavishnu Orchestra. The reason why I'm doing this channel is actually because last year I just had to express my love for the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and so I did a video of their albums. I ranked their albums, and there was such a response to that I've carried on in that vein because of that. And so for me personally, yet again, that band has given back to me. You know, if I hadn't have discovered the Mahavishnu Orchestra, you know, when I was like 15, and then sat down on the drums to try and find my way through that music, I don't think I would have developed into the player that I am. But even now, you know, this band is still providing me with inspiration, and it's opening up new ideas and new territories. It's such an incredible achievement. You know, so for those of you who have just learnt the news like me and are in a bit of shock and have gone to YouTube to, you know, search for something about Rick and come here, you know, all I can say is I'm with you. It's a sad day. It's a sad day for jazz. It's a sad day for music, and it's a sad day for fans of the Mahavishnu Orchestra. You know, but we have those albums there. We you know, we all know, and I'm sure there'll be so many people saying the same thing as me, of what an incredible bass player, and the more incredible for being able to make an artistic statement like that whilst putting their ego to the side. What an achievement. Thank you, Rick Laird. Thank you for everything you've done for me in my life. You know, what more can I say? You know, you made an impression, and long will your memory and the music live on. Thanks for watching. and I'll be back very soon with some other videos about jazz and fusion and prog. But yeah, rest in peace, Rick Laird.